History loves certainty. It rewards the army that stands firm, the general who refuses to yield, the banner that never falls. Yet some of the most decisive moments in warfare are born not from resistance, but from misdirection, from a step backward that hides a blade. In 642 AD, among the broken hills of western Iran, one such moment unfolded. An instant when confidence sealed fate and an empire mistook illusion for triumph. This was Nahāvand, and this was the end of Persia. The ground was slick with blood. Trenches overflowed with the dead, armor and flesh indistinguishable beneath the dust. For 3 merciless days, nearly 30,000 Arab fighters surged forward again and again, smashing into Persian defenses and shattering upon them. Each assault ended in screams, broken ranks, and silence. The hills drank deeply. From his command post overlooking the valley, General Farazan watched with the calm of a man who believed history favored him. His formations still held. His archers commanded the heights. His cavalry waited, fresh and disciplined. Then he noticed movement, dust clouds drifting away from the front, wagons turning east, tents being dismantled. Fires were left to die. The enemy was withdrawing. Relief washed over the Persian lines. After days of slaughter, the Arab army had finally broken. Farazan allowed himself to believe the battle was decided. His forces were larger, better positioned, and seemingly unshaken. Against such strength, no army could endure. What Farazan could not see was that he was witnessing not defeat, but design. The withdrawal was deliberate, calculated, and deadly. By the time this battle was fought, the Persian world was already cracking beneath its own weight. For centuries, the Sassanian Empire had stood as one of humanity's great powers. Its armies had contested Rome and Byzantium across generations. Its merchants moved wealth from Mesopotamia to the Indian frontier. Its kings ruled vast populations with absolute authority. But decades of relentless war had drained the empire dry. The treasury was empty, the countryside was exhausted, and the last strong monarch, Khosrow II, had driven the state beyond recovery. His victories were grand, his ambitions limitless, and his fall inevitable. Betrayed by his own commanders, he was overthrown and killed, leaving behind a throne soaked in blood. Chaos followed. Rulers came and went with alarming speed. Some were murdered, others vanished. Children were crowned only to be removed weeks later. Power fractured, loyalty evaporated, and the machinery of empire ground to dust. Then came the storm from the south. From the Arabian deserts rose a force the Persians had not anticipated, a rapidly expanding caliphate bound not only by arms, but by belief. Under determined leadership, Arab armies moved with speed and purpose, carrying a faith that promised meaning and paradise to those who fell. In 636 AD, the illusion of Persian invincibility shattered. At Al-Qadisiyah, a massive Persian army was destroyed. Soon after, the imperial capital fell. The emperor fled eastward, stripped of power, chased from province to province like a ghost of a vanished age. Yet even then, Persia refused to accept its fate. From exile, the emperor issued a final call. Every remaining governor, noble family, and loyal commander was summoned. This would be the empire's last gamble, a final attempt to crush the invaders and restore what had been lost. Command was entrusted to Farazan, a general of noble lineage and proven skill. He understood that this battle would not merely defend territory, it would decide whether Persia survived at all. The army he assembled was enormous. Royal guards marched beside provincial troops. Conscripts armed with spears filled the ranks alongside elite heavy cavalry whose reputation still inspired fear. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with men who had never before seen war. The exact numbers are debated. Chroniclers exaggerate, others minimize, but all agree that Persia had not fielded such a force in living memory. Farazan selected his battlefield with care bordering on obsession. Near Nahāvand, the land itself became an ally. Steep hills shielded his flanks. Elevated ridges allowed archers to rain death from above. Narrow valleys forced attackers into confined approaches, where numbers meant nothing and slaughter was inevitable. When word of this army reached the Caliph in Medina, the danger was immediately clear. A Persian victory here could unravel years of conquest. The fragile expansion of the caliphate could collapse in a single stroke. The commander chosen to face this threat was unexpected. Not a legendary war hero, not a figure celebrated in songs. Instead, the task fell to Nu'man ibn Muqarrin, a quiet, methodical leader known not for brilliance, but for composure under impossible pressure. Nu'man marched with 30,000 hardened veterans. These were men shaped by constant warfare, survivors of battles against both Rome and Persia. They understood discipline, endurance, and sacrifice. But even they recognized the danger ahead. Attacking a fortified position while outnumbered more than 3-1 defied every rule of war. It promised disaster. Retreat would have been sensible. Delay would have been prudent. Nu'man rejected both. He understood that time favored Persia. Every day spent waiting allowed Ferozan to strengthen his defenses, summon reinforcements, and rebuild morale. Withdrawal would signal weakness and invite a devastating counteroffensive. There was only one path forward: to strike where defeat was expected, to retreat in appearance, advance in reality, to transform withdrawal into a blade aimed at the heart of an empire. As the Arab army pulled back and Persian confidence soared, the trap was already closing. And when it finally snapped shut, it would not merely decide a battle. It would end 4 centuries of Persian dominance and rewrite the meaning of victory forever. How do you defeat an enemy that appears to hold every possible advantage? That question hovered over the hills of Nahāvand as both armies prepared for what seemed inevitable. To most commanders, the answer would have been simple: you don't. You withdraw, regroup, and hope for a miracle later. But Nu'man ibn Muqarrin was about to demonstrate something far more dangerous than courage or numbers. He would show that the greatest weapon on any battlefield is not strength, but thought. Ferozan had created what looked like a flawless instrument of destruction. The Persian position was not merely defensive, it was a masterpiece shaped by patience, experience, and cold calculation. High ridgelines crowned the battlefield, transformed into observation posts where scouts could track enemy movement from miles away. Nothing approached unseen, no maneuver went unnoticed. Below those ridges, the land rose sharply. Any attacker would be forced to climb uphill, their formations breaking as fatigue set in. Their shields raised not against the enemy ahead, but against the sky raining arrows down upon them. Jagged rock formations narrowed the approaches, compressing advancing forces into tight corridors where numbers ceased to matter. Even a determined breakthrough would be swallowed by prepared resistance. Yet geography was only the beginning. For weeks before the Arabs arrived, Persian engineers had reshaped the hillside itself into a weapon. Trenches carved into the slopes zigzagged across every approach route, not crude ditches, but carefully engineered killing pits. Sharpened stakes lined their depths. Overlapping lines of fire ensured that anyone who entered them would be struck from multiple angles at once. Cavalry charges would disintegrate on contact. Infantry assaults would be slowed, fragmented, and slaughtered exactly where Persian commanders intended. Behind the trenches rose thick wooden palisades reinforced with iron spear points. These structures were not simply meant to stop bodies. They were meant to stop minds. Their looming presence was designed to sap courage, to make attackers question the very idea of advancing. Worse still, breaching one section offered no relief, only exposure to crossfire from several directions. Survival beyond the first barrier was an illusion. Manning this labyrinth of death were nearly 100,000 Persian soldiers. At the front stood veteran infantry, men forged in decades of war against Byzantium. They had faced Roman discipline, Roman steel, and Roman siegecraft, and lived. They understood how lines broke, how men died, and how fear spread. Shields locked together, spears angled forward, they formed an immovable wall built on experience rather than hope. Above them, lining the ridges like silent judges, stood ranks of archers and slingers. From these elevated platforms, they commanded the battlefield entirely. Every firing lane was calculated, every overlap intentional. Once an enemy force entered the kill zone, it was no longer fighting a battle. It was being erased. No angle was left uncovered, no weakness ignored. But the true terror of the Persian system waited behind the lines, the Savaran heavy cavalry. These were not merely riders on horseback. They were living weapons, both man and mount, encased in layered iron, advancing as a single armored mass. Their lances were monstrous, capable of punching through multiple enemies in one charge. For centuries, the Savaran had been the final argument of Persian warfare, the force unleashed when victory needed to be absolute. Ferozan held them in reserve. The steep terrain limited their movement at first, but this was deliberate. Once Arab forces committed to the assault, once they became trapped in trenches, broken by palisades, exhausted by uphill combat, the Savaran would strike. A downhill cavalry charge against disorganized infantry was not combat. It was annihilation. The brilliance of the Persian system lay in its layers. An attacker would first cross open ground under relentless missile fire, then struggle through trenches under spear thrusts, then scale palisades in brutal close combat. And if any survived that ordeal, they would face fresh cavalry crashing down with unstoppable momentum. All of it uphill, all of it planned, all of it waiting. Ferozan's command structure mirrored this philosophy of control. Orders flowed through rigid hierarchies. Each unit had a predetermined role. Archers knew their exact firing sectors. Infantry understood their assigned positions. Cavalry commanders had rehearsed counterattack routes until they could ride them blind. There would be no improvisation, no chaos. The Persian army was static by design. Ferozan had no intention of maneuvering, flanking, or pursuing. His numbers and fortifications made such risks unnecessary. The Arabs would have to come to him, and when they did, they would be bled white against his defenses. When the Arab army finally arrived and established camp within sight of the Persian lines, Ferozan's confidence hardened into certainty. His scouts reported roughly 30,000 enemy troops, less than a third of his own force. They carried no siege engines, no heavy artillery, no visible strategy beyond direct engagement. From his elevated command position, Ferozan could observe the entire field. The terrain spoke plainly. A harsh, rising expanse funneled straight into prepared killing zones. Any advance would unfold exactly as he expected. For 3 days, the armies watched each other through skirmishes and probing attacks. Ferozan used the time to refine his defenses, adjust firing lanes, and study Arab formations. Across the field, the enemy appeared cautious, reserved. Perhaps, he thought, they were finally grasping the hopelessness of their situation. What Ferozan failed to understand was that this hesitation was not doubt. It was discipline. Numan was not searching for a way to survive the Persian fortress. He was searching for a way to turn it against itself. And while the Persians waited behind walls of wood and iron, convinced that victory could not escape them, the most dangerous phase of the battle was already underway. Because the enemy who thinks he has already won is no longer watching for deception. And at Nahāvand, deception would decide the fate of empires. On the 4th morning, Numan set the stage. What followed looked like desperation to everyone watching from the Persian heights. But it was performance, a controlled illusion, and only one man understood the script from beginning to end. 30,000 Arab warriors surged forward once more, climbing the same slope that had already consumed thousands of lives. Shields lifted as the sky darkened. Persian archers responded instantly, releasing volleys in disciplined rhythm. Arrows cut the air like blades. Slingstones smashed into helmets, shattered jaws, and sent bodies tumbling backward. From the ridges, it looked less like a battle and more like a cleansing flood, sweeping men away as if they were nothing. Still, the Arabs pressed on. They reached the trenches and threw themselves forward with raw, almost reckless violence. Men slipped into ditches already slick with blood. Cries echoed as bodies piled atop one another. Fighters hacked at the palisades with desperate strength, only to be met by forests of Persian spears thrusting down with brutal precision. The killing was intimate, chaotic, and merciless. Then, at the height of the carnage, Numan ordered the retreat. The Arab lines collapsed backward. Wounded men were dragged away. Shields were abandoned. Formations dissolved. From above, it looked exactly like what Farazan expected to see, an army finally broken. Farazan watched them fall back and felt certainty harden into triumph. The enemy had failed, exactly as predicted. The following day brought a second attempt, more aggressive, more frantic. Arab cavalry tried to sweep around the flanks, while infantry battered the center. The Persian response was devastating. Crossfire tore through advancing ranks. Uphill charges stalled and died. Bodies carpeted the slope, layer upon layer. Survivors fled in visible panic. 2 assaults, 2 humiliations. Persian morale soared. From his command post, Farazan surveyed the battlefield with satisfaction. His defenses remained intact, his formations unbroken. The Arabs had exhausted themselves against his walls. Tomorrow, he believed, would bring either surrender or a final, effortless slaughter. Then came the night that rewrote everything. Persian scouts returned with urgent reports. Disorder filled the Arab camp. Tents collapsed. Wagons rolled southward. Cavalry units scattered. Wounded men were evacuated in haste. Fires went dark. The signs were unmistakable. The enemy was retreating, completely. What the Persians could not see was the design behind the chaos. Every tent that fell did so on command. Every wagon moved according to plan. Every sign of collapse was carefully staged. This was not fear. It was choreography. The goal was simple: lure the Persians out of their fortress. At dawn, confirmation arrived. The Arab army was fleeing across the plain. Victory, at last, lay open. Some Persian officers urged caution. Why abandon a position that had proven invincible? Why chase a defeated enemy? Farazan rejected their doubts. A retreating enemy, he believed, must be destroyed before it could recover. Given time, the Arabs might regroup. In open ground, his superior numbers and elite cavalry could end the war in a single, decisive blow. He gave the order that sealed Persia's fate. The Persian army poured down from the hills. Nearly 100,000 men abandoned the fortress that had guaranteed their dominance. Trenches were left empty, palisades unmanned. The defenses that had made them untouchable were left behind as they surged forward in pursuit. Below, on the open plain, the Arab army stopped retreating. In a single, breathtaking motion, the fleeing lines wheeled around and locked into perfect formation. Standards rose. Ranks tightened. Disorder vanished. Here, the battle belonged to them. No uphill climb, no narrow corridors, no walls of wood and iron. This was open ground, fluid, wide, unforgiving. The kind of battlefield the Arabs had mastered through years of mobile warfare. The Persians were caught unprepared. Their descent had stretched their formations thin. Units advanced at uneven speeds. Gaps opened between regiments. Orders tangled and overlapped. Momentum replaced discipline. At the moment of maximum vulnerability, Numan struck. Arab infantry turned as one and slammed into the advancing Persians. Cavalry surged into both flanks simultaneously, crashing into exposed wings with brutal force. In seconds, the chase reversed direction. The hunters became the hunted. Persian commanders shouted orders, trying desperately to restore cohesion. But it was too late. Their archers had lost the high ground. Their infantry was scattered. Their heavy cavalry struggled to maneuver amid confusion and broken terrain. Then came the final blow. From hidden ravines and folds in the land, Arab cavalry erupted behind the Persian lines, not in overwhelming numbers, but enough to create the most lethal force in warfare: panic. Suddenly, Persian soldiers were fighting in 3 directions at once. Supply wagons scattered. Commands contradicted one another. The disciplined formations that had defined Persian warfare for centuries began to fracture beyond repair. Pharazôn fought to regain control, but the psychological collapse was complete. His men no longer knew where the enemy was, or where safety lay. In the chaos, Numan fell, struck down amid the fighting, but the assault did not slow. Command passed seamlessly to Hudhaifa ibn al-Yaman, and the pressure intensified. With Persian cavalry dispersed and infantry overwhelmed on multiple fronts, the line finally broke. The center collapsed. Then the wings. Fear spread faster than steel. Somewhere in the rout, Pharazôn was killed, cut down or trampled by his own fleeing men. With both commanders gone and no clear chain of command, the last great Persian army disintegrated. The slaughter was total. Thousands lay dead across the plain. Survivors fled in every direction, abandoning armor, weapons, and order. The final army of the Sassanian Empire ceased to exist in a single afternoon. Far to the east, Emperor Yazdegerd III received the news that ended his world. No armies remained. No strongholds could save him. He fled deeper into Iran, eventually reaching Merv, where he lived as a hunted fugitive until his assassination years later. For the Arabs, Nahāvand became known as the victory of victories, not for the scale of death, but for the brilliance of the deception. A 400-year empire did not fall to greater numbers or stronger steel. It fell to superior thought. And history remembered the lesson. The most dangerous enemy is not the one who attacks you head-on, but the one who convinces you that you have already won.